So often people think this night is about communion, which is why First Communion is often celebrated on this night. My good friend Sharon, who's a pastor in North Dakota, had 20 First Communicants this evening, which was canceled because of the blizzard. I suppose it's not a bad idea to have First Communion on Maundy, Thursday, because then more people come to the service. But I think then that is what sticks in our minds, the Last Supper Jesus has with his disciples. Certainly that is part of this night, but the night is really about the new commandment which Jesus gives. Maundy comes from mandatum, which means commandment. Jesus gives his disciples this new commandment to love one another as he has loved us. And then he shows us how to love by kneeling down to wash his disciples' feet. This is something that servants would ordinarily do. So there is that aspect which freaks Peter out. Why would you, Lord, wash my feet? You are too good to kneel and wash my feet. I should be washing yours. But in a strange way, it is easier for us to wash another's feet than to have our own feet washed, isn't it? There's something about letting someone else do something for us that is not easy for everyone. Some of us like to be self-sufficient. Some of us view needing help to be a sign of weakness. For some of us, being vulnerable is a scary thing. Burying our feet, period, let alone letting someone touch them, is a very uncomfortable act. Even though the servant is the one to wash feet, how many of us would prefer washing than being washed? In our world, I think washing someone else's feet gives us a greater sense of control. We can perhaps recall being a child, and if we had loving parents, remember being bathed by them and being totally okay with that. No self-consciousness, allowing ourselves simultaneously to be bathed and loved, receiving love fully. At what point does that become hard for us? To allow ourselves to be loved, to be taken care of, to be prayed for, to be prayed over, to acknowledge our weakness, our vulnerability, our need for forgiveness, our need for touch, for love. Recently, someone sent an email sharing some tough stuff that has happened, and I think they must have gotten a lot of caring responses and offers to help, because the next email said, "I'm fine, really I am." I recognize that in myself. Perhaps you do too. We let our walls down and ask for help, and then wrestle things back. I'm okay. It's okay. It's all about surrender, though, isn't it? To cease resistance, to give ourselves over to love. I remember after delivering my third child, which some of you know I did myself, in the front seat of the car with our other two sons, Kai and Pear, in the back. Giving birth is, of course, a monumental act of labor and love. But then this woman in the hospital, where I didn't want to be and I hadn't expected to end up, came in and bathed me. It was 4:00 in the morning, and I was exhausted. And so rather than protest, rather than resist, after giving my all to birth my child, I surrendered myself to this woman's care. I allowed her, without resistance, to care for me. And I remember how lovely that was, and how I gave myself over to that moment, to this stranger, to her care. It is ultimately what Christ asks of us, to surrender our need to control. Since, of course, any control we think we have is illusion, anyhow. Our birth plan obviously didn't go the way we planned. Death often, most often, comes as a surprise. We lose our jobs, Russia goes to war, COVID happens, Jesus is crucified. What is there to do but bathe and let ourselves be bathed in love?